Welcome to Rustic and Shine Resin Designs workshop. Today is the start of a three-part series. I'm going to be pouring a beach ocean scene, and this is going to be poured over three very large window panes. Okay, here we are, getting all of the resin poured into my containers for mixing. I'm doing three separate colors for the water. These pieces that I am working on, this is the largest project I have completed once it's done. These window panes, the three of them, each one is 28 by 16, so they're very large pieces. I've prepped them by painting them. I've painted a white base on them, and then I've also used a textured spray paint to do the sand, and I've attached some shells, rocks, and starfish on there to be part of the beach scene. So back to the mixing here. Mixing with resin is incredibly important, and timing is also critical. So working very quickly, being organized, all really important things with resin when you're working with it. Because I'm mixing so much, it's a little bit more of a challenge for me. Mixing, I've got the three colors there. I also have one small container of clear, and I also have my white, which is going to be the wave portion. So what I do with these is, you'll see I'm adding the powder tinting agent and mixing as quickly as I can, and then checking on my coloring. I let the resin flow down the side of the container to see if I'm happy with the colors. What these colors are going to do is they're going to represent the change in the water color for the depth of the water. So mixing enough resin to do all three of my window panes at one time, because it's really important to have the colors be very consistent across the three panes, so it looks like it is just one continuous water scene. I don't want to have any differences in coloring between any of the panes, because they will be put into a frame and it needs to be very consistent and look like they basically are all one piece. So going back, adding a little more coloring agent to each of them to get them to where I can have them thick enough with color that they will cover the white that has been painted as the base on each of the window panes. And now I'm just taking a little bit of the clear, putting it into my container for doing the mixture of my white, which will be the white foamy portion of beach, and a little bit of foam throughout the water as well. So again, just going back, kind of reassessing each one, stirring and double checking my coloring, making sure I'm happy with what I see as far as what the transition is going to be between the colors, that the color is strong enough but not too dark, so that it looks very natural. So I've just about got it mixed up here for all of them. This is the last one, the teal color, which will be the color that is closest to the beach. The other two will be further up on the window panes, representing getting into deeper water. So now, again, I have about 20-25 minutes maximum working with this resin to get it on my window panes, have it where I want it to be, so it's mixed, so there's no hard lines in the coloring, and also getting my waves on. So I've got a lot of work to do in a very short time and on a very large scale. So I'm just starting with the deepest water first, putting on my colors. I'm trying to get it even as to how much I'm putting on each one to have it consistent. It's not an exact science by any means, because this is meant to be water, which always has its own little quirks as far as the bottom goes and what the coloring does. Again, just dividing it up, pouring it right onto the painted window, and as you can see, the coloring is covering the white, which is what I wanted. The white gives me a good base for starting with, so that it is a lighter background for the water, which helps to kind of reflect some of the blue back once it sets. Instead of having a dark base, that would make the blue much darker looking, which, you know, might be kind of cool to do, but for this particular one I wanted to keep this very light and more ocean, beach, tropical kind of scene. Now I'm going to be adding the teal, which is the color that goes closest to the beach, because to me teal is the real tropical kind of color that everybody kind of likes when they go to a beach, where you just get those nice colors that you just can't get most places. So again, dividing it up between the three window panes here. Now I need to start spreading it around. This is something that has to be done, I like to do with my fingers, mixing the colors so that I don't have a hard line. Just incorporating it down the window pane, making sure it's out to the edges, and mixing and spreading it out, bringing that the teal down to where I've got the painted beach sand. That's kind of the edge where I want my resin to stop for the watercolors. And again, you'll see moving the resin around, swirling it, and getting the colors mixed so that it looks natural, so you don't see a hard lines where the color changes. It just flows and looks like it would naturally. I mean, it doesn't look all that good right yet, but once the resin starts to settle and it keeps moving and it smooths out, then it gives you that nice coloring where the colors are mixed and the flow looks much cleaner and smooth. So again, I'm just trying to do this quickly. I really like to use my fingers to move the product, to swirl the product together, to mix the three colors so that there isn't, again, that transition is smooth and it looks natural. So moving very quickly. Again, keeping in mind these are very, very large pieces and my time is ticking, so I can't dilly-dally. I need to be very consistent and keep moving, get the product spread around, because I still need to add the wave portion. So here I'm just doing the last one, getting it smoothed out and trying to kind of keep it consistent again across the three pieces where we've got the water changing color from the teal to a lighter blue and then to the darker blue. I like to use, typically the agents I'm using are all powder for the watercolors. The white that I use is a gel. That's my personal preference. I've found for myself these work the best for me. They may not be the best for everybody, but they're ones that I've gotten very good results with, and I'm happy with what the finished product is. So just finishing up here, mixing the colors, making sure there's no hard lines and that everything is covered. And I'm not too concerned about the edges of these as far as covering the outer edges of the glass, because this will be going into a frame, so the edges will be covered. I want the product to be out to the edge, but it doesn't have to be super super coverage as far as the very edge of the glass goes. Now I'm just getting the clear, and I'm going to do a line of clear right on the edge of the beach against the blue, because what I'm wanting to have here is to have the water washing up on the sand, and when it's washing up on the sand it becomes almost transparent, and then it goes into the blue with the water where it starts to get a little bit deeper. So I'm just trying to spread this out between the three pieces so we have some consistency as far as how much on each piece and how far the wave is going to be coming up on the beach. I don't want it to be coming too far, because I've got the seashells, the starfish. I don't want the waves to be covering that, but I do want the waves to be washing up on the shore a little bit. I think seeing some of the beach there with nothing on it is really quite attractive and makes you feel like you want to just stick your toes in the sand. So here I am, just moving the product, spreading it down the board a little bit, and making sure it's up close to the blue, keeping some consistency as far as how far down I'm pulling the product without trying to get it too thin, because we do need the product there to be able to add the white and spread it with the heat gun. Now I'll be putting on the white will be the next thing. First I'm just going to try with the heat gun just over the top of everything, taking out some bubbles that may be there. Just that also helps to have the resin smooth out, taking out bubbles, smoothing the product, and that creates a little bit more flow with the heat that moves the product, and so it gets the mixture to be a nicer look to it, not so rigid with the finger marks in it that I've done. Okay, so going back to the wave portion here. So now I'm adding the white, and this is going to be showing where the wave is washing up onto the beach. And again, I'm keeping a very close eye on my time, because my time is starting to tick away, and if I don't get this on quick enough, the resin in the container there, the white will be too thick, and I won't be able to spread it on the board like I'm doing right now, and it won't blow with the heat gun to make the bubbles I need to make. So keeping close eye on the time, really important when you're working with resin. Couple other things really important is to be in a room where there is no wind, where there's no cold coming in. It needs to be a very consistent temperature. Resin does not like cool temperatures. When you're working with it, it won't mix properly. So having temperatures, 70 degrees or warmer, which for me is awesome, because I'm not a cold person. I love the heat, so this works great for me. But it's critical for your resin. If your resin is too cold, you will not get it to work the way you want. Now I'm just running some white across the water. These are just going to give a few little waves out further in the water, like you would typically see when you're at a beach. The waves come rolling in, whether they're small waves or big waves, they come crashing in at some beaches. So now I'm just taking and using the heat gun again to work the product, to get it to spread a bit, to start getting a little bit of the wave action happening with the foam happening. This beach is a beach that is a calmer beach, so I'm not going to have a lot of big foamy waves. These are softer waves, and you'll see here when I'm doing down on the beach here, it's not a heavy white wave, it's quite delicate. So this is a beach that would be a nice calm beach for swimming, with just a soft, very soft wave coming in on the beach. I use the heat gun to push the product out and into the blue water portion. You'll see there's a little bit of foam starting, but there will be more once I go back over it. I will be using my little torch, and that also helps with releasing any of the bubbles in the blue portion, but also helps to create the foamy wave look on the white portion. So going back across my board, trying to keep the flow consistent with the waves across the three boards, because again these will be put into a frame once completed, and they need to look like they all belong together as one piece. So coming back and going down on the beach portion, blowing some of the product back into the blue portion. Again, this is not a big heavy wave, this is very light, so I'm not trying to push the product too far. It's just going barely into the blue, just to keep it nice and soft. And you'll see I'm not putting any resin onto the rest of the beach portion or onto the shells. That's going to be the next step that I will be doing on the next portion of this series. So right now, just trying to finish up, get my waves completed before my resin gets setting up too much. You can maybe tell a little bit the resin is starting to thicken a little bit. It's not moving as well as it was when I first started. It's getting thicker, so trying to finish it up, get it done, doing the final wave on the last window pane, and just pushing the product again, very gently, getting that nice soft wave. And we're just about done the waves. And I'll come back across all of these pieces and we'll check with my torch, going over them to finish the wave action. I've decided I needed to add a little bit more of a wave across each of them, so I need to do that while I still can, because as I said, once the resin gets to a certain point, I can do no more. It's starting to get a little bit thicker. It's not flowing off of the stick onto the frame, the picture frame there very well. So getting my heat gun get this last little wave blown out, and you can see the resin is thickening. So working quickly, getting the rest of that one completed. And going back across the other two boards, finishing that up. The heat gun does help to heat the resin as well, which helps to move the product a bit. You need to be super careful though not to linger with your heat gun, because resin is very flammable and you certainly don't want to start any fires. So moving the heat gun steadily, like no lingering, keep it going, and you should be fine with the way it goes. And you'll see I'm just trying to get this done, finish it up. Again, these are very, very large pieces I'm pouring, and trying to get each piece completed before my resin sets is critical. And being organized, having it thought out, how I wanted to have the water, how many colors I was going to use, how I was going to do the beach. All of those things needed to be thought out well in advance, because once you start mixing, you are committed. You need to keep moving and not stop until you have finished doing everything you need to do within the 20 to 25 minutes. And now I'm just taking out any bubbles over the whole thing. This first layer it's a really important layer, because this is setting the scene for the whole finished product. This is giving the base of color to the water, which is really what you're looking for, is what colors are you going to have at the end of this. Because once I do the second wave, it's going to be just a very light coloring agent. So the base colors are what the whole picture is going to be about. So I'm finishing up here, just going over, making sure I've gotten out all the little tiny bubbles and all of the resin, that I've gone over all of the portions where I've got my white and want the foam to be happening. Again, this is not a crashing wave kind of beach. It's very soft, so we're not going to have a lot of big foam happening. And same with the heat gun, the torch, you need to keep moving. It's even something you need to move quicker with than the heat gun. Now I always like to go back and I like to look over my pieces to make sure if there's anything I see in my resin, now is the time that I can remove it. If there are any little pieces of lint, or if there's a small hair, anything like that that is sitting in the resin, you want to take it out. Here we go. We're doing the second pour here. I'm getting my resin poured, measured out. Measuring resin is another really important part. You need to be very sure about how much you're mixing. This particular resin is a 1-to-1 ratio. Make sure that when you're pouring, you are right on the line of the measurement that you want to be on. No more, no less, because that will affect how your resin sets up. So what I'm going to be doing now is I'm doing 3 separate pours today. And why I'm doing that is I'm going to do each window pane separately. This time I'm doing just a very light coloring over the top of what is already there. This is going to be the base for doing the second wave. So this one, I want to be able to see through the resin. When I put it on the window pane, I want to see the colors underneath. I want to see a little bit of the foam that's there that has already been put in on the first pour. So keeping this fairly light, again, I'm letting the resin run down the side of my container to see how thick the coloring is, getting it to the color that I feel comfortable with, and also mixing my white so that I have it ready for doing my foam. I'll be doing this exact mixing 3 times today, doing each window pane separately, and each time I'm doing this gives me 20 to 25 minutes to get this completed. So keeping an eye on the clock again. A little bit easier today because I'm doing them separately instead of doing all 3 window pane pours at the same time like we did yesterday. So now I've got my colors where I want them to be. So I'm coming back over to my window panes. The resin from yesterday's pour is set, and I've added in some turtles onto the first pane that I'm pouring on right now. Those are just a fun little thing that just adds to the ocean scene. I'm pouring the resin right over top. Those have just been attached with a little bit of glue just to keep them so they don't shift when I put the resin over top. And again, you can see this is just a lightly tinted resin. You can see through it, you can see the turtles, you can see underneath the color of the water that I had previously poured. This also shows the wave underneath there. So because I'm working with doing 3 separate pours, I've got a little bit more time today to spread my product around because I'm only doing 1 window pane at a time. So that's kind of nice for me to have that time to work with making sure I've got everything where I want it to be as far as covering all of the water portion. I'm not going down onto the beach portion this time. My coloring will only go to the edge of the water that was poured yesterday. So that's what I'm doing now. I'm just pulling the product down, getting it down to the edge, making sure it's smooth and relatively consistent throughout the whole window pane. Getting it down to the edge because that's where I'm going to be putting my second beach wave. Is going to be right along the edge where I'm pulling this product down to. And again, you can see this resin has gotten a little bit of color to it, but not too much. We really want to be able to see underneath and get the depth of the water, the depth from seeing the waves underneath, because when you're looking at an ocean, the waves are breaking and they're getting rolled and getting covered up, and a new wave comes over top, and that's sort of why there's going to be a second wave, is to get that illusion that this is another wave coming in, rolling in onto the beach. As I mentioned before, this is not meant to be a heavy wave. This is a light wave. This is a very calm, kind of serene beach that would be just light waves rolling in. And I think, to me, that's why there's turtles swimming there too, because turtles to me would enjoy being in a water that's a little bit calmer, and especially when they have a baby, because this, to me, there's the mom, the baby, and the dad. So they're out on a little family swim. So that's just my take on it. But then just going over everything with the heat gun, taking out the bubbles, getting the product to just be nice and smooth, When I'm using my heat gun, I've got it at the maximum temperature. My heat gun has got adjustable temperature setting, and it's got 2 settings for the how fast it's blowing, and typically I am using it on high. Occasionally I will use the lower setting if I'm wanting to blow something a little bit gentler, but with big pieces like this I'm using the full force of my heat gun and the full temperature. These are critical pieces for making any resin piece. You need to have a heat gun or a torch to work to get your product to be as smooth as it can be, and to eliminate any of those bubbles that are there, and to help, especially with doing a wave. These pieces are really important for trying to get your foamy wave look. So having the right tools, really important. And I'm just going over and taking out anything that I see that maybe is a little piece of lint or something that I see sitting on the resin. We want those things all to be removed. We want this to be as smooth of a finish as we can. So you'll see me moving back and forth and looking at it, different angles, trying to see if I can see anything anywhere that maybe needs to be taken out. And that's what I'm doing with the long stick, is just taking out any little pieces. I'm just waiting now for my white to thicken just a little bit. I don't want it to be too thin when I'm doing the next pour for the beach second wave coming in. So waiting, mixing. Again, almost always you'll see if I'm not pouring, I'm mixing. You always want to have everything to be mixed extremely well. We don't want any little bits and pieces of anything of coloring sitting in your resin as the finished product. Just waiting for that, and you'll see I'm always lifting my stick up out of my container to see how the thickness is. Also, another thing that I'm doing by holding it in my hand is I can feel the temperature. The longer it sits, the more heat it's giving off as it starts to set up. So the product that I have in the container is getting warmer, and as it's getting warmer, that's also an indicator to me that, you know what, it's time to get this onto my window pane and move it, because I still have to blow it with my heat gun and I need to torch it. So moving forward with it, spreading the line along the edge, right where my resin is sitting, so we don't have a gap. We want the wave to be right up tight against it. And you can decide how much white you want to put on when you're doing something like this. This is, again, a soft kind of wave that's coming in, so it's not going to have too much white on it. There's going to be a little bit more than the first wave, but not too much. So again, I'm going to put a little bit up further in the water. So we've got a top wave there too. We'll still have the ones underneath that you'll still be able to see through, but we're just adding a little bit more depth to the whole picture. And I don't want to cover up any of my turtles with a bunch of foam. We want to still be able to see them and see them clearly to know exactly what they are. And taking out more bubbles, just going over the top. And if you've got a spot that maybe along the edge where the resin maybe didn't get spread to. You can use your heat gun to push a little bit of the resin over that area. Just going across here now and just doing a light blow on this little wave that's going across. And you'll see there's a little bit of foam over the one large turtle, but it's not too much. You definitely can see the turtle underneath, and that's what we want. And going down to the beach, pushing that wave out, and this one I'm going to push out a little further than I did with the first one, just to make it cover a little bit more of the shallow water. See the white underneath the foam of the first wave. You can see it through ever so slightly, and that just adds to the texture of our overall piece. And the resin will still create the foamy portion for a little while after I've finished working with it. It's not uncommon for it to continue to make a little bit more of the bubble. Most of the bubble is done with the heat and the torch, but resin keeps moving until it sets. So that's kind of a fun thing about it, is you don't really know what the total finished picture is going to be until it's completely set. Going over the top of this again, taking out the microscopic little bubbles in the resin, and also working to get the torch to help with making those foamy little pieces of white into the broken wave that you like to see. So just going over the top of it and moving very, very quickly. The torch has got different settings as well. I've always got mine set on the highest torch, the highest flame possible, and moving very quickly. And just taking another look at the whole thing. If there's anything I see that needs to come out, this is going to be, hopefully, this should be our final pour on the water. So we really want this to be looking nice, no flaws in it. So always looking, moving around different angles to get the light so I can see what it looks like and make sure that I'm happy with that. Okay, so I have mixed up the exact same amount of resin, colored it just very lightly again, so that it will be able to be seen. All the colors underneath will be able to be seen through it. So I'm pouring that onto the second piece here. This is again second wave. These are the steps that are very consistent when I'm doing things with the second wave. The first one always has all of the color in it. So then the second wave is just a very lightly colored resin, and that allows everything to be seen through it, but it does add a little bit of depth. It's not just a clear resin, because that wouldn't give you the depth that you would want to have. And I'll be adding in also the white portion, which will give us again more waves. So you'll see I'm always over on this side, I'm always pulling out and using Lysol disinfecting wipes. Those are a really valuable tool. They are the one and only thing that will remove liquid resin off of things. So I like to use it for wiping my gloves off in between when I'm doing several pours like this. It will remove the liquid resin from my glove. It will remove resin from my tools that I'm using for mixing. So those are very, very valuable to me, because for me, sometimes I can reuse my gloves, most times I don't, but I do reuse my tools, and I very often reuse my mixing containers. So using the Lysol wipes is the only thing that will remove the liquid resin. That of course needs to be done before the resin starts to set up as well. So again, here I am, I'm just moving the product down, getting it down to the edge of the blue so I can get my white product put on for the second wave. Just going around the edge to make sure I've got everything there covered, and that I'm happy with how it's looking. I want the resin to be fairly consistent as far as how I've spread it and how deep it is across the whole piece. The heat gun will help to smooth it out, and it will keep flowing and flow over the edges as it needs. These pieces have been leveled long before I started pouring any resin. The level comes out, and ensuring that it is level in all directions so that the resin will flow properly and won't cause anything to flow off to one side. Taking the heat gun here, taking out bubbles, just blowing it again and again. I'm on high setting for my heat and for what I can blow. Instead of my low setting, I'm using the high setting to blow out bubbles. Checking my white to see how it's doing, if it's getting a little bit thicker, if it's feeling like the container is getting warm. And that's why I like to hold it in my hand, is so that I can feel it, because it's not always just visual. Sometimes it's the feeling of the container and the temperature of the resin. Once I've finished pouring all of these, there will be a fair bit of heat coming off of them, and that's just because the resin is setting up and starting to cure. It creates a chemical reaction, and when working with resin, you see I'm wearing gloves, I'm wearing a respirator. You need to be using safety gear when you're working with resin. Resin is caustic once it's mixed. You may not always smell fumes with certain resins, but you always need to be taking precautions. So make sure you have your safety gear. I can't emphasize that enough. So mixing, waiting for it to thicken, and in the meantime just taking out any bubbles. Even though the resin is not very thick, the little bubbles still pop up to the top, and the heat gun just blows them away. So always wanting to have a nice finish at the end, because again, this is the final layer on my water, and I want it to be as perfect as it can be without any little flaws. We want it smooth, and we want to make sure that the resin is thick enough with the white before I put it down, so that the wave behaves the way I want it to. If it's too thin, and I blow the heat gun on it, it's just going to blow the product away. So as I'm stirring, I'm looking at different angles. I'm just double checking if there's any little pieces of lint anywhere. And again, having a nice still environment, a consistent temperature in your room, all important things. I'm fortunate, I'm working in my garage. This is an area that is totally separate from my house as far as ventilation goes, so none of the fumes go into my home. And I would strongly suggest, if you're working with resin, you need to have it someplace where it is separate as well, not in your home. Okay, so I'm just about ready to do the second wave. One last final blow with the heat gun to get any little microscopic bubbles out. Okay. And starting with the white going across. I find using wooden little mixing sticks for me is the best for putting the white down. That way I can control how much is being put down at one time. I can always go back and add more, but if I'm trying to do a thinner line, this seems to work really well. Just being able to control it more. And again, I'm going to be putting a little bit more down on this second wave than I did for the first wave. I just want this one to be a little bit more foamy than the first one, but not too much. And all of these things are something that can be changed. As you're doing it, you can decide how much you would want to do as far as a wave. If you were doing a very foamy wave, it would be a beach where big crashing waves come in, so you would want to use lots of white, and your line would be quite wide. This one is not that type of a beach, so I'm using a little bit less. And you can see on the first window pane there, the waves are blown up into the water a lot further than I did with the first wave. And that's just the way that I felt that I wanted this to look. And then putting in another wave up higher, again trying to be consistent across so that we have a nice picture between all three, that it's consistent with our waves. Taking out the bubbles, and again I'm going to just do a quick blow across the whole board and then come back and do my blowing on the waves, spreading them out a little bit. And you can see it's almost like a ripple effect when the heat gun is blowing on there, and that just is pushing the product out across the resin to spread it out and making it look more like a little wave. Coming back across for the second small one that I did, and a lot of that one is just breaking up, and that's consistent with wave action, that it's not always a big wave going right across. There's little ones in between, or broken waves here and there, so keeping it looking as natural as possible, and pushing out the beach wave, the second wave now. And by pushing it out, you still want to be able to see that first wave underneath. You don't want to necessarily see it all, but you want to see bits and pieces of it. It just gives you that nice depth. And pushing it out a little bit further, like I did with the first one. Okay, well, that is just about it for the second wave on this one. I'm going to come back and do the torch, and that's just going to help to break up the white there a little bit more and give us the little bit of bubbles that we're looking for. Oh, I got a little bit of resin on the bottom of my torch there, just from what has flown off of the first piece there and onto the table. Okay, I'm taking out more bubbles. Moving quickly. back and forth, covering the whole window pane, making sure I don't miss anywhere, getting out those little bubbles, creating the foam. And that's about it for the second one. I'm just about ready now to move on to doing the last piece. Again, really nice that I was able to do each of the pieces separately and with the second wave. Just makes it a lot nicer to have a little extra time to work with, making sure I'm happy with how everything looks on each individual piece. Another good thing with my particular setup here is I have very good lighting in my garage. Really need very good lighting, especially working with something as large as these pieces, to be able to see all of the flaws that may be in your resin, to remove those, to be able to see. It's also really important because you can really see the colors that you're mixing too. So again, this one I have done just another mixing, exact same as the other two previous ones, where I've just lightly tinted the resin with a little bit of blue, keeping it so that you can see through it. We want to be able to see the shark. We want to be able to see the waves. And we want to keep our tools clean. If we can clean as we're going, that's the best way to go. That's typically what I like to do. I'm not worrying about cleaning my large containers just because my time is a little bit tight, and it's more important for me to get working on the piece and working with my resin than to always be cleaning the containers, especially with these big pours. Smaller ones, I've got more time, but this one, the focus is get my resin on, get it spread, get it where it needs to be, and then if I have time afterwards, then I can worry about cleaning the rest of my containers. So I'm spreading the resin out. Again, I quite like the little shark I've got in there. It just adds to another dimension and just adds to the overall piece. It's a peaceful little beach, but it's also drawing in all kinds of critters from the deep. And spreading it out onto the edge. And you can see on the other pieces how, even though the resin isn't set, you can see through from the top layer to the bottom layer. And you can see the coloring really nicely through there. Again, moving the product around. Always prefer to use my hand if I can. Sometimes I do use tools for moving product around, but the majority of the time it's with my fingers that I'm using to move the product. And wanting to make sure you're not dripping on your other part of your piece with your resin. If you do, by accident, drop some resin, drip some, you need to clean it up right away using, I use Lysol wipes. I find them to be what work best for me, and if you've got liquid resin, they can clean it up really very nicely, and they remove any of that resin. Once the resin starts to set up, then of course you can't remove it with anything. You have to wait until it's set up, and you may be able to to pry it off, or you may just have to live with it. So always being careful where you're pouring and what you're doing with your tools, so that you don't have those kinds of accidents happening. And just going over the top again, looking for any little bits of lint, hair, any little things. If you happen to get a little bug fly in or something, you want to get those out. And you always are crossing your fingers afterwards that after it's all poured, that nothing lands into your resin, so that you've got that nice finish. Getting ready with the white, stirring, always stirring, making sure it's mixed. And with the white, I do use a gel. It's not a powder. I found that it gives me the best results for doing the wave. I've tried several other products and just did not give me the look I wanted. And it mixes in very nice. Working to keep all the bubbles out. And then trying also to keep it consistent with the beach wave, the second wave here, keep it consistent across all three pieces so that the wave looks like it's one big wave going across, so it's not bigger on one of the pieces than on the other pieces, so it's very consistent, like it looks like they belong together. Oh, another little piece of lint. And the shark, again, just like the turtles, I added on after I had the first layer was set. Then I just cut him out and put him on there with a little bit of glue so that he would not move once I poured the resin over top. And you'll see I've got a little blob of white there. That's fine. I'm going to be blowing that wave out anyways, so I'm not worried about that at all. You can have little spots where it's thicker than other spots, and your heat gun is just going to help you blow that out and just create your foamy wave. Just making sure you've got a nice line and that you're happy with how much you've got there, and that takes some experience to figure out how much you need to put down as to how your wave is going to look, and figuring out how your timing is. How long has your resin been mixed for? Is your container starting to heat up? If it's starting to get hot, you can have flash cures where the resin will almost instantly cure and it will become extremely hot. I've only had that happen once when I first started working with resin. Just basically was lack of experience. Now I'm very aware of that and know to watch my timing, to be organized, and just move forward. Once you start working with it, you don't stop. You just keep going and watch your clock and make sure you've done everything you need to do before the 25 minutes is up, because that's your stop line for this particular resin. Now some resins you can work a little bit longer, but this particular resin, for me, 25 minutes is the absolute maximum for working with it. And I wanted to do just a little bit of foam by the shark there, so I did do just a little tiny piece of white there, just kind of to make it look like the water is moving around him. And then coming back down to the beach and start working with blowing the wave up. And you can can just see how the heat gun blows the product. It's actually blowing it in waves, blowing it up into the water, the deeper part, giving us that nice finished look. Because once I put the heat gun down, then the wave doesn't get blown any further. It doesn't move typically much further than where I've put it. The bubble portion, the foamy portion, that can continue to happen, but typically it won't continue moving up on the wave and into the water. So just trying to finish that up, making sure I'm happy with how far I've blown it. And then coming back with my torch. Again, always moving very quickly with it. Be careful where you aim your torch. You don't want to catch anything else on fire. You always have to be aware of safety with resin in all aspects. And of course, you know, when you're adding more heat to the resin, that's also creating more chemical reaction. So again, safety gear, really, really important. But all of these tools for me are really important to get the look that I'm looking for. It just takes practice and experimenting. And liking how the shark is looking, the little bit of a white coming kind of off of his tail. And finishing it up with the final blow with the torch. Really liking the colors on the water. I'm quite happy with that, going from the teal to the light blue to the dark. The mixture is good, there is no hard lines. It just looks like a water that you could just wade out into and go swimming. Okay, today it's the final pour. This is the third part of this project. I'm mixing up my resin. Today I'm going to be covering the beach portion with resin. So measuring extremely carefully. I'm mixing enough resin today to do all three of my pieces together, all poured at the same time. So mixing, today there is no coloring agent going into the resin. This is going to be completely clear. And because of that, you'll see it may seem like I'm mixing and mixing and mixing, because in theory I am. Because I'm not adding any coloring agent, I'm not doing more mixing to ensure to have that coloring agent incorporated. Instead, I need to make sure that my resin is thoroughly mixed. I don't want to see any streaks in the resin. When you're mixing resin together, one portion is heavier than the other. So the mixing, the scraping of the sides, the cleaning of your tool, and just really making sure you are happy and content with how your resin looks and how well it's mixed. Now I've got some shells and rocks, and I've got a starfish, all part of the beach. These I have glued down, and again I've glued them down initially just to hold them in place, just enough glue so that they won't move when I'm putting the resin on. The resin goes over top of each one of the shells. I want to make sure everything is completely covered, and once the resin hardens, it acts like a glue, and these shells will not go anywhere. They will all be completely covered. The resin will run down the sides and seal them up. So I'm going to go over top of each of these pieces and make sure that I've covered each shell, each of the little rocks. Everything is completely covered before I put the rest of the resin onto my beach area. And that part of the reason is I want to make sure I have enough resin mixed up to cover everything thoroughly. I don't want to come back and find, oh, I missed a spot. I want to make sure everything is covered. And going on to the next piece. And it's just gonna, the resin's just gonna flow down each of these, and it's gonna start to spread out onto the beach portion, which is absolutely fine because I will be spreading resin throughout the rest of the beach area. Now these window panes are from a very old window. These will be placed back in the frame once this is all completed. But because they're such old windows, they're a very thin glass. The glass is not cut straight. You may have noticed the one corner is chipped off. So they've got a lot of character to them, and want to be very careful working with them because they are pretty fragile. So been extremely careful to have them placed on my table where they would not be bumped, where I would not be moving them. And you don't want to be moving them anyways when you're working with resin and doing several pours. This is the third day of pouring, so these boards need to be sitting perfectly level just to keep the resin so that it doesn't pool and that it flows and gives that nice finish at the end. So just going over top of each of the shells. Some of the shells are bigger than others. I've got this awesome little starfish, just adding more character to the whole overall piece. And part of it is to seal each of these pieces up, but also to make sure that they're sealed into the overall piece of glass, that they are attached and they are not going to be moving anywhere. We want that nice finish over the top so they've got that shine on them just like the rest of the window pane has. So the ocean portion now is completed. That's had time to set up overnight and harden. These pieces will sit for at least a week before I will move them. I want to ensure the resin is completely cured. So here I'm just going to go back over and now start filling in the rest of the beach area. All the area that's away from the shells. We need everything to be covered, and I'm going to take that resin on each of these right up to the second wave. I want to do it up to the second wave and not just to the first wave. The second wave is a thicker wave because it's poured over the first wave, and I want this resin to bump up right against that just to give a nice look once it all sets up and dries. So just taking the resins, splitting it up between the 3 different panes, making sure I'm happy with the coverage. I have mixed extra resin to make sure that I had enough to cover everything. You don't want to be running short with your resin when you're doing any project because you can't add to it, you know, once you're pouring. You have to wait until it sets and then do another level over top. So resin is not inexpensive, so you want to plan out well in advance how much resin you need for the area that you're covering. And that's, you know, that's again a lot of the planning. You need to plan out your piece. Something like this, as I've said, this is my largest piece that I have poured, and calculating out how much resin I need to cover the space properly, making sure I have picked out my colors, that I've thought out the whole process so that there are no surprises when I get moving and starting to pour resin. I know exactly what I'm going to be doing for my first wave. You know, I planned out my colors, how many I was going to do, how much resin I needed for each color, how I was going to lay them on the board. All of those things are just things you need to plan. You need to be organized. You need to know what you're doing. You don't want to waste your resin, and you don't want to do anything that's going to compromise the piece you're working on. You don't want to waste this because it's not inexpensive. So smoothing it all out, making sure I've got all of the sand covered. And again, I'm always watching to see if I see any little pieces of lint, pushing the resin up to the edge of that second wave. So I'm covering the first wave over. And this is clear resin, so you can see it perfectly underneath. It's very visible. It's just sealing it up so that you've got the resin to be a little bit smoother looking up to the second wave. And there's that corner that's got a little chip in it on that particular piece. But that gets covered up with the frame, so that's not going to be a problem for the finished portion. And just going back and moving it all, making sure everything is covered. I want all of the beach to be covered. I want to make sure all my shells and rocks are covered. This just seals everything. When you have a resin piece, something that you need to be aware of is resin does not like direct sunlight. It does not like extreme heat. So when your finished product is done, you need to ensure that these things are not going to be in direct sunlight. It can affect the finish of your resin. If it's in a lot of heat, the resin will soften. So being aware, resin does dry very hard, but it's not invincible. But it does give a lovely finish. It really does give a very clean, shiny, nice finish, and the colors of the water become almost iridescent, and they do have a little bit of a shimmer in them, so that gives a little bit of a nice look when you're looking at it from different angles. And again, just I'm using my fingers and spreading it out, getting it out to the edge. You can just see how liquidy it is. It's really not setting up at all just yet. I still have lots of time to still work with it and spread it around. Going back, just checking all of the three pieces to make sure I'm happy with how it's looking, that I've covered right out to the edges, that all of the shells are covered, that the resin is right up against them, or that it's flowed down from pouring it over the top of them, down around the edges of them. And I'm going to take my heat gun, and this time of course we're not blowing any waves. All I'm doing is just taking and removing any little bubbles. And I don't want to blow too much over any of the shells. I want the resin to be covering those. So it's just removing bubbles. And doing it across all three pieces. And there's some neat little shells on there. There's different things. There's some little colored rocks on there. Some bigger shells, different types of shells, different colors, without getting too busy. and taking out more bubbles. And then I'm just double checking all of them for any flaws, and get my torch out. And the torch really does take out more bubbles. It just works great. The heat gun is pretty good, but the torch really does take out any of those little microscopic bubbles. You may not see them, but they are there, and as the resin thickens, they can create little spots that don't disappear. So you want them to all be popped and taken out of your resin. So that gives you the smooth finish that you're looking for. And moving quickly, you don't need to linger. You will see the bubbles popping when you're doing it. Moving quickly so there's no fires, no smoke. And then I'm going to come back, because as I'm looking at this, I'm not quite happy with what I see as far as how the resin is flowing up to the second wave. I'm seeing a small gap in some spots. So I'm going to get my little wood tool, and I'm going to go just along the edge of that second wave, and that's just going to smooth out the resin right up against that second wave, just to make sure there are no gaps there, to make sure the resin flows right up tight to the second wave. So that's finishing up the third pour and finishing up this project. And that's it. Thank you very much for joining me and spending time seeing how I do my resin work. If you want to learn more about how to do this or see some of the things that I've created, you can go to my Facebook page, Rustic and Shine Resin Designs. Thank you so much.